Well, good afternoon, everyone. We only got 9 that jumped over so far. We had well over 100 participating, so we're going to hang loose for just a minute or so. What you've experienced now, which is so funny, sort of, on our second webinar regarding technostress and how technology sort of gives us stress and things we can do to manage it, we've had severe technical challenges. So there's something wrong with the link. You're going to see an email update that you saw in the blast email real quick. You won't have to jump off and click that link. You're on the right one. But we're going to give it just a minute while we try to help people navigate to an updated link. We're going to go ahead and blame Microsoft. Probably going to get sued for saying that out loud, but we're going to go ahead and blame some technology, some link stuff, some presenter stuff, or whatever else. But it would not allow us to make that other link that you're on go live. So we're going to kind of give it a minute or two, and then we'll get started with our number 2 with Dr. Ashley Nixon from Willamette out in Oregon. She's been a great asset for us here in Leo as we've been working on developing workplace mental health programming, as well as content on our webinar or our resource hub, as we like to call it, to make sure that people have access to tools and information that they need. I see the email just landed and people are navigating over relatively quickly, so that's good. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to be recording this, we'll be sharing it out, and we will make sure that it is available to anybody that gets on late or misses some parts of it. But just for those attending, just really thanks for coming back to our Labor and Economic Opportunity webinar series. As I was mentioning, we had a challenge with a link not working correctly, and it wouldn't allow us to go live, so we had to change the link here at the last second. Hopefully Dr. Nixon doesn't have to jump off right at 2:30. We'll see how that works out. For those attending, you know there's a Q&A box at the top of your screen. You can submit questions to at any time throughout today's presentation. We'll get to as many as we can at the end. If you haven't already, please make sure that you sign up for emails from our michigan.gov/workplace mental health page. That also includes the recordings. It'll have this recording and any slides that we share out, as long as the presenters want us to do that. And there's other information and resources posted there. And as we continue to focus on the 3 pillars, as we call them, those things that are happening in the workplace, like technostress, things affecting the workplace, and the individual behavioral health supports, our webinar series will focus around those pillars on different topics that will be directly related to some of those. We'll have some big announcements in the not too distant future on some program development and other work that we're doing to take this to the next step, to get really focused in on that what can we do about it phase. And then, as I mentioned, our webinar series has been revamped throughout this year. So you're going to see these multiple part series of what is it, what do we do about it, other tools and resources or other information. So that's where we're at today, is in part 2. If you missed the first part, you can go to michigan.gov/workplace mental health, and that one's up there. And just again, really happy to be joined by our great friend Ashley Nixon. This is the second time you've seen her in this series, but you've seen her before helping us out with the different things that are impacting our workplaces. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Ashley, for part 2.
Thanks so much, Sean. And thanks everyone for joining me today. One of the things that I wanted to start with quickly, since I can now at least be a floating head joining you instead of last time when I was a disembodied voice, I will give a brief recap of what we talked about last time and then move into some of the tools that we can use, particularly targeting tools by leaders, managers, and human resources. So this time together, what I want to focus on is those systems, processes, and the importance of role modeling within the organization to try to mitigate the impact of technostressors. So first, what is it and why it matters recap? We have these 3 big distinctions with constant connectivity. So this is how technology has just become pervasive in our daily lives. Many of us check our emails first thing in the morning, last thing at night. We never fully disengage from work, which causes not only relationship problems, but also it doesn't ever allow our bodies to fully relax, which has long-term physiological and health implications. We have profoundly rapid change. such as the types of changes that led to our disturbance in the link today, where we constantly have to learn new things. And for many of us, some type of AI or automation is seemingly likely to make our jobs more challenging, if not redundant, in the future, where we might have to change our skill sets in order to stay in the workplace. Finally, technology truncates our ability to communicate effectively, which ends up disrupting our relationships, making it harder for us to form relationships. And we end up having a lot more social conflict in the workplace, as well as just more social conflict with individuals across broader society. And that's in large part due to the low context and the lack of empathy that exists in this type of communication. So the outcome for employees are really, really bad, right? We have physical health implications. Many of us suffer from sleep disturbances, fatigue. This can increase the likelihood that we are ill, that we get injured. So there are many bad physical health outcomes that can be long-term and include mortality. For the psychological part, we have depression and anxiety. And for many of us, if we have depression or anxiety or know folks who struggle with it, we understand what the long-term implications of this can be. So mental health outcomes are really, really severe and growing more severe as we have things like death and despair or deaths of despair and increased suicidality across many, many employment categories. And then we have our work-related outcomes, right? So we've got these really terrible mental and physical health outcomes, and then we have the work outcomes. We have higher rates of disengagement. We have lower productivity. We have lower quality. For those of us who have ever felt depressed, even just depressed mood, we know it's harder to do work. We get less done, and we get less done well. Employees are also more likely to leave the organization, which has all the costs associated with that lack of knowledge, hiring a new person, onboarding a new person, etc. So the impact on organizations of employee stress is huge. The total economic impact estimated for the United States is about $300 billion a year lost to productivity, to accidents and injuries, and to just folks not being able to show up and perform the way that we otherwise could if we were not in a routinely distressed state. And then employee illness alone accounts for a stress-related employee illness alone accounts for a $187 billion loss in the U.S. economy annually. So that's our recap. What is technostressor, or what is a technostressor? Why is it important to employees, and why we should really care about supporting people, not just their a civic duty, but this is something that has a huge impact on our entire society. So with that context, what can we do to try to reduce and manage technostressors? And I want to start with talking about leadership. And this exists both at the top of an organization, but also, of course, we have many folks in leadership roles throughout our organizations. So this can be everyone from a team lead, a manager, all the way up to our chief, whatever their title is. I always like to start an understanding of leadership that there are two gifts that a leader gives an organization at the very top, and that is vision and culture. And hopefully these things are linked. Hopefully we're able to say, this is what we want to accomplish, and this is how I want to accomplish it. If we only concentrate on what we want to accomplish, the how we want to accomplish it can become anything. And this is where we start seeing more and more work being pushed on employees, burnout, and an inability to sustain the vision, even if we are in fact able to achieve the vision. So with this, if we're thinking about employee well-being as part of a core aspect of how we want to do it, and I think of this as people's ability to sustain their role. So this is really a sustainability issue within our human factor of an organization. We heard a lot about sustainability in supply chains recently. Now I want us to think about sustainability in the human part of our organizations. So we have this vision. We can set forth that we want people's well-being to be part of a priority, we're going to accomplish this goal without destroying anyone's physical or mental health. And then from the leadership side, we start that ability of signaling what our culture is. And so here's where we establish, transmit, and enforce policies and norms. And let me be way more specific. If you are a leader and you are telling employees that it's okay for them to go home and to engage with their family, and then you are emailing them at all times of the night, calling them at all times of the night, or even just yourself clearly being visibly working late into the evening or early in the morning or both, you are setting a norm for your organization. And that is work comes first, above your physical health, above your families, etc. And so we have to think about the norms that we start as leaders within our organizations and within our teams. That's not to say that if you have a lot of work, you should just stop at 5 and don't worry about it. But we want to think about the visibility of that work that we're doing. One of the things that many people have started to do is go home. You may go back to work later, but going home so that your employees know it's okay to leave the office. And then if you want to send emails, don't send an email at 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. Put a schedule on them so they go out the next morning when you know your employees are supposed to be at work responsive. I should also put the caveat out there that I know some of the folks on this call may represent organizations where you do have to be available because of crises that might happen in the middle of the night. I want us to think about this as a general best practice. Hopefully not everyone is in the organization has to be available every night. And so we want to think about setting those norms for what a normal night looks like versus a night that I need to be available. The other side of this is a big bucket we can think of as constructive leadership. And this is going to include all the behaviors that lead to encouragement and recognition of individual contributions, right? Trying to get people to bring those in, rewarding them for them when they do it. Really supporting employee growth and development, which will be something that we're talking about at the managerial level today, and then at the individual level next time we get together. And to be adaptable. Things are changing rapidly, and if we can go into those situations with creativity, with optimism, with a what kind of opportunity does this provide, as opposed to panicking, that can be really helpful for allowing our teams to focus on the opportunity that's available rather than the potential threat. Now, we don't have to do this alone. I also want to move away from this idea that every leader in an organization should be superhuman. We have systems within our organizations that make these things clearer. They make them salient. They remind people about them regularly. So when we think about our culture, we want to think about what's in our handbook. Does it address employee well-being? Does it talk about how we want our employees to cope with the workload that they have? Employee contracts. We can also think about this in employee onboarding. What are the norms that we want people to come into our organization understanding? Yes, we work hard, but we also disengage. This got to the point where there's a great example of Google Ireland started taking people's laptops on Friday evening and locking them in an office so that they couldn't take them home with them, so that they would have to not work for 2 days and they could have their laptop back on Monday morning. It caused a huge amount of stress the first Friday they took the laptops. And about 2 months in, people were really starting to enjoy the fact that they had 2 days where they did not work. Again, might not work for your industry, but hopefully we can be creative leaders, be adaptable, and figure out what kind of norm or what kind of practice might be effective in helping people disengage. But again, we want to think about our handbooks, our contracts, our onboarding. Are we consistently giving the same message to employees? And then the other thing we can think about are signs and visual reminders. It is nice to have things. Remember, everyone's trying their best, right? If I walk in every day and I see that on the wall, and then I get an email that could be perceived as rude, hopefully this is sunk into my brain and I'm seeing this sign and I'm saying, you know what, they're trying their best. So here's where we want to start thinking about what can we take out of our hands and just automate for ourselves, right? Like they're consistently, everyone in the organization is consistently getting the same message, and hopefully we're going to start believing it and it's going to become first nature to us or second nature to us. We also have the leadership side. We can start thinking about how can we build constructive leadership into our competency models? How can we think about within the selection and promotion of our leaders? How are we going to look for people who encourage folks, who reward folks, who support folks, and who have shown a strength at being adaptable? And then we have a lot of organizational support systems that kind of can capture both of these things. With training and development, if I have someone who needs support in technology mediated communication, I should have a training opportunity for that person, or a development. If it's more idiosyncratic, I might just want to coach them on how to send more appropriate emails. For leaders, why on earth wouldn't I have trainings that help them be more encouraging, more supportive, and more adaptable? So we start thinking about these systems that are run within our organization. I, as an individual, don't necessarily in a manager capacity have to do all of this, but I do need those backup systems of knowing people are getting consistent messages when they enter the organization, knowing what makes you successful as a leader here, and then having the training, developing, coaching to make sure that people can develop those skills. And then importantly, performance management. If I am saying all of this is important and I am not documenting your ability to do it, chances are it's not going to be a priority. The things that are in our performance management system are the things that we're going to make sure we do because we know that our jobs are dependent on them and our pay is dependent on them. So if we want well-being and all of these leadership behaviors to be part of it, it has to be embedded in that performance management system. And so here's where we start seeing the strong impact that our people management systems ought to have. And within this, we have human resources. Hopefully, these are the folks who are putting together the practices, the policies that we're engaging in as an organization that are allowing us to be successful. Now, from our leaders, we get what is our vision, what is our culture, what is important to us, right? So we have to set the culture there. That's what's going to tell HR to embed these things across all of the training, development, and performance management. And then, of course, if our leader is saying this stuff is really important and then not doing it, no one's going to follow. So we really have to have that leader set the culture and then engage in it so that they're role modeling the correct behaviors. HR is establishing systems that support that culture, supporting the system delivery, and making sure the systems are doing what they're supposed to be doing through review. And then, as many of us in managerial roles know, the bulk of it comes down to us. We're the ones who have to enact this stuff. We are the coaches. We are the people providing developmental advice. We are the ones sending people to training opportunities. We are the enforcers. We have to apply the rules. We have to provide performance management feedback. And importantly, we also have to role model this behavior. Because again, if we're not doing it, our team is going to do what we're doing because they know that we're setting the standard, and that standard is what's going to drive their future ability to promote, to get raises, etc. And so I want to be a bit more specific on some of these practices. One is around fair and clear scheduling and leave practices. A huge stressor, technology and otherwise, is lack of fairness. Everyone just wants to feel like they're getting a fair shake. So being fair and clear about how scheduling occurs, how leave such as FMLA, vacation, etc., how those decisions are made and allocated, and that it's a process where everyone is treated equally. Actually having the policies and procedures set forth, again, HR has to create those and managers have to deploy them. We need that training and development system, and we can start thinking about how important this is in the context of technostressors. We constantly have new technology that we have to learn. So when we think about rapid change, I need to know, how can I deploy AI to make myself more effective? How can I learn this skill well enough that I'm not worried about my organization getting rid of me, because I can use it to make myself better instead of them thinking I am replaceable by it. When new systems come out, some people are great at picking up those skills quickly. Other people might need more support. And so having the training and development systems to make sure we learn about new opportunities as they come out. As we move more towards automation, again, we need training on how to support that automation, how to fix when things go wrong, etc. So we really need to have a robust training and development system, and that's going to take upward feedback from management as well as downward system development from HR. Our performance management system, what does this look like for our employees? Again, we need this back and forth conversation because the managers have all the information, right? HR knows what we want to accomplish, but they're not really seeing the behaviors on the ground that the managers are. And so we need to have this back and forth to make sure that we have a good idea of what's happening across our organization. And then a huge thing for work stress and for technostress is defining reasonable role expectations. Again, if I don't expect employees to check their email after 7 p.m., I should let that be known. I need to understand, have I given someone a reasonable job to do? If I had the ability to see anyone right now, I would say, raise your hand if you've ever been given a job that felt like it was a job and a half. But I think most of us have experienced that before. And really, we need our managers to be in touch with employees so that they understand, is this a reasonable job to do? And that doesn't mean every week is going to be 40 hours. I am fine with the fact that sometimes my job is a bit busier than it is other times. What I'm not fine with is if my job is routinely a 60 or 70 hour a week job. That will have profound physical and mental health consequences for me across my life. And that will have financial consequences for my organization because I'm just not going to work as well. And chances are I'm going to try to find a job somewhere else. So we have to make sure that we are giving people a reasonable job to do and that they have the resources that they need to do that job. And I want to get into a little bit more about the roles of a manager. Sean, should I do this today or wait until our next time together?
That's a great question. I think today you really hit your primary focus, right? And I definitely want to make sure that you have the content you need for the next one. So if you want to wrap up here, however you want to do it, whatever works for you.
Just don't want to run over too much. This will probably take another 5 minutes.
Go for it.
Okay, perfect. So first and foremost, manager as first responder. Here, our real goal is to reduce and mitigate technostressors' impact in the workplace, and then to support and proactively respond to employees. And so here's my busy slide for the day. What does this mean? First and foremost, we have to manage the work, right? And so here we've got the defined role expectations. When do you arrive? When do you leave? What is our policy on breaks? What is our policy around communication via technology? What is our policy on responding to emails at 10 p.m.? So on and so forth. We have to do the regular manager stuff of directing and motivating employees. And then we have to manage the workload and the resources. So do you have a reasonable job? Do you have what you need to complete that job? And then we have the even more tricky part, which is the managing people. And so here we have to build positive relationships with our team members. And this includes both us having a positive relationship with the members of our team, as well as trying to facilitate positive relationships amongst our team members. And in this way, promote teamwork. Again, we find that when people work in isolation, including a lot of remote work, they end up having some mental health issues associated with loneliness. We are social creatures at nature. We want to have good relationships with people. But sometimes I'm sure many of you have been in situations where people just needed a little help. I find one of the key things that I end up doing repeatedly is just providing a different perspective on somebody else's behaviors, actions, or words that allows someone to have a bit more empathy for who they are and where they're coming from. And this is a regular part of my facilitator role within my teams and organizations. We have to ourselves role model healthy behavior. So again, if we're staying till 10 p.m., our employees are going to start staying till 10 p.m. as well. Even if we go around and tell everyone to go home, if we're not going home, they're not going to stop working either. And then we need to be able to support impacted employees. And so here, I want to talk a little bit about this role of facilitator. So when we see people who are using technology in an inappropriate way, and so that could be using it all of the time, failing to develop new critical skills that are needed for their role, or engaging in behavior and communication patterns that are inappropriate for the workplace, we need to intervene, potentially support people. If you're getting bullying and harassing emails at work, it's nice if your boss says, this is inappropriate and I'm going to make sure it's taken care of. And that way I would feel supported. Or if I'm struggling to learn a new software, it's important, it's nice to have my boss say, look, I get this can be really struggling sometimes. It can be really tough. I'm going to get you into a training for it. So we want to make sure that whatever the issue is, we've thought through what an appropriate intervention is. This might mean mediating a conflict between employees who have gotten into a fight over email. This might mean working with HR to get additional support for training and development. This might mean coaching people on what it means to actually disconnect from work in the evening. And then engaging in that coaching role to make sure that that behavior is consistent. Telling people they need to be more courteous over email isn't helpful unless I'm going to follow up regularly and say, what are you doing to improve your communication style through email? What have you done to do this? Have you seen a difference, etc. And then finally, the role that most of us probably dread a little is the regulator role, which is where we have to appraise job performance, we have to reward good performance, and we have to identify bad performance and address it. So this could be using coaching, this could be using training, but we have to come up with a plan to address it. And additionally, it could mean moving employees towards termination. If they choose not to engage in the organization the way that we find it to be appropriate, if they won't or can't learn a new skill set, if they won't or can't communicate in a civil way with their colleagues, these are things that we have to take care of. There was a book out a few years ago, well, 20 years ago, probably now, called Fire All the Assholes. And what they actually found is that when people are just jerks at work, the best thing we can do as managers is get rid of them. That has only increased as technology has facilitated the way that we communicate. So we can go into these more next week. But hopefully what you were able to take away from this is we still have these three big buckets of technological stressors, and there's unique steps that we all need to take at the cultural level, leadership level, managerial level, and HR support level that will allow us to more effectively manage this.
Cool.
I see a question in the live Q&A. One thing I wanted to note, if you have specific questions you would like me to discuss next week. So next time we get together, I'm going to talk about interventions at the individual level and how we can support those in our colleagues and employees at work. If you have some specific questions that you'd like me to address, please feel free to email me. And I've posted my email in these slides, which I'll share as well. So you'll have access to that.
Cool. So just a couple of quick questions. Everybody, first an easy one. We had the link issue, so you had to swap over. This is recorded. It will get shared out, so you will be up to speed by the time we get back to number 3. In both cases, while we feel like we're pretty tech savvy, I'm sure it's our fault, but we had the link wouldn't work. So we'll make sure that we work on that for next time. Ashley, one of the questions we got in the box is, would working in the office versus remote work help reduce technostress?
What we have found is that hybrid work is probably the best balance. We see increased job satisfaction and engagement when people are working in their office 2 to 3 times a week, and then from home the other 2 times a week. I think this just allows people to balance some of those life needs with some of those social needs. Now, sometimes my students get upset with me when I point this out because they really want to work remotely. But again, we desire that communication. Creativity comes from when I know something and you know something, and we get together and realize there's something interesting there. So that being in the workplace brings a lot of value to us. And so there is value to it. But when we require it and require people to come into the workplace 5 days a week, we actually see a spike in anxiety, depression, a reduction in engagement, and productivity. And so if we have the flexibility, that hybrid relationship is likely the most effective.
Yeah, it sounds, and I was thinking if we're talking specifically about technostress for that question, if we can be remote, more than likely we spend most of our time staring at computers. And that same technology is going to be with you in either location. So if you kind of look at it, what Ashley said, and I don't want to speak for you, Ashley, but you look at the human part of in-person versus remote versus the technology part, you could still have all of these issues if you're in the office 5 days a week and staring at computers and working with email and, kind of carrying your laptop home with you and staying on late. So I think it's a great question, a great answer. I did have a couple of sort of questions / points I think that you brought up in your presentation. I think as managers, one of the things we do when we're giving presentations is we talk about how we work. And you had mentioned finding ways, or how do we cope with the workload? So if we have too much work for our place, certainly as Ashley said, you can have bumps where it's a lot, but then if that's the norm, that excess time is creating stress for people. Even if it's not technostress, it's creating stress for people. So it sounded like to me in your presentation that there's a cultural and an operational aspect of really getting into dealing with technostress, right?
Yeah.
Well, we went over today because we had so much fun trying to deal with technology to make sure that we could get on here and give you this live presentation. It'll be shared out. We'll be sending it. You'll see a link for the next one coming up next month where we wrap up this 3-part series on technostress. I really appreciate everybody joining us today, and we'll see you next time.